So when the Bible says Satan is the Lord of this world, it's talking about Saturn. Satan is a spirit. He's everywhere. He can be one place. He can be everything. But he has a beacon in the heavens in the form of the planet Saturn. The Jewish orthodoxy is pretty upfront about this. You know, they worship on Saturn's day. They use a yarmulke that reflects or represents the hexagon on the North Pole of Saturn. Look at the Pope. He's got the yarmulke on too. They're smothering the crown chakra. If your goals are bad, Saturn can help you find some dirty deals. When we see SoundCloud rappers and people selling their soul, rocketing up to the height of society, you know what that comes along with, right?
This is the mistake I think all religious people make when thinking about the dark powers, the devil, whatever, is they think that the devil would trick you in some kind of obvious way, like a villain with a twirling mustache, and It's like, no, what they do is they give you 90% truth and light, and they just weave in a 10% evil. And so then, 1,000 years later, people are like, hey, the book says it, so it must be God. That's how the demonic, the negative polarity tricks humanity.
Speaking of a black magic spell, the greatest black magic spell in history, where we're killing 90 billion land animals per year and everyone is eating meat 3 times a day, immeasurable suffering. I cringe to think about the karma that humanity is creating for ourselves with this mass enslavement.
Welcome to the Jesus Way podcast, where we explore the true gospel teachings of Yeshua the Nazarene, and we invite you to follow the Jesus Way with us. Shalom Alechem, peace be with you, and welcome back, my friends, to the Jesus Way podcast. Today we're joined by a good friend of ours and new guest on the show, Mr. Conor Logan. Thank you for joining us today, brother.
Good to be here, Aaron. Great to meet you. Already met James, but big fan of your guys' work.
Yeah, and likewise, man. James actually put me onto you a few months back, and we just started diving into your content. I watched your documentary on oranges, and you just have so much amazing content. So if I can set you up a little bit here, Conor is also known as Dr. Longo on YouTube and has an amazing hidden gem of a YouTube channel and is really just a wealth of knowledge on so many interesting topics, from ancient civilizations to forgotten history, Tartaria, advanced technologies, and of course, one of our favorite topics on this show, which is early Christian origins. And so we actually discovered you, Conor, really in the same way we discovered every guest we've had on this channel thus far, from Cam Waters to Chris Sartain, Dr. Tabor, Ross Nichols. We sort of have discovered our NazDog friend group by searching for information on YouTube about, the history of the Nazarenes and the Nazarene Church, because at least a few years ago, there was just so little information available online. And so James and I would do deep dives and just kept finding these little gems of you people on YouTube talking about this topic. And to our surprise, we kept finding that all these people who are kind of doing their own independent research, as you have done, are really coming to all the same central conclusions that we have in our personal research, a lot of which we're going to talk about today. And the one that's most central to this podcast, obviously, is that the very first Christian church was not the Orthodox Gentile church of Catholicism, right? But the Jewish Christian church of Jesus's very own sect, the Nazarene sect, which is attested to by multiple secular and patristic sources as the church that Jesus himself established in Jerusalem, which were called the Poor Ones, or the Ebionim, and that Jesus then appointed his brother James to be his successor of the church, and then James ruled the church for 30 years until his death, and then James passed it to Simeon, who was the cousin of Jesus. So it's like, we have this Jesus church in the 1st and 2nd century that is preserving the bloodline of Jesus for about 100 years. And then this entire history of this Nazarene church has been ignored and controverted by religion and covered up by the false history, right, of the Pauline Christian tradition. So we're going to pick your brain today, Conor, on some of that topic and Essene, Judaic history, and animal sacrifice and paganism. We're going to have fun just kind of talking about some interesting theories that you discuss on your channel that are sure to entertain. So, James, I'll go ahead and throw it over to you now. Where do you want to kick us off today?
Well, there's so many amazing topics we're going to discuss today. If you have not heard Conor's YouTube channel, Old World Florida, you are in for such a treat because he gets into some of the most fascinating theories I've ever heard in my life, and we're going to touch on them today. But giants, Nephilim, where is the Garden of Eden? Is the Garden of Eden potentially in America? What is the role of America in all of this, in all of the biblical history? We're also going to talk about astrology, which has become totally verboten in mainline Christianity. But Conor has a wealth of knowledge about this, and I think he's going to show that there really is some practical utility for followers of the way, for people who believe in Jesus as the Messiah. So, Conor, thank you for being here. The first thing I want to ask you today is, with your wealth of knowledge about all of these different spiritual traditions and paths, I mean, look at all the books behind him. He's at an amazing bookstore that he works at in Florida called the Elephant.
The Dancing Elephant.
Dancing Elephant. Check that out.
Nice.
So, Conor, with this wealth of knowledge about all of these spiritual traditions, why do you love Jesus? Why do you think the Jesus way is the highest possible spiritual path for all seekers?
Well, honestly, that's flattering. You guys shouldn't build me up that much, but
we hyped you up, bro.
I'm very flattered. So I'd say that's accurate, though. I've looked into most of the spiritual paths, most of the religions. I'm a fan of religion. I like spirituality. I've never been like put off by religion, and I grew up Christian, so that's my background from birth. Is I went to an Anglican school. And, I was there till I was 14 or so. And that always stuck with me. I had a background knowledge with the Bible. We read the Bible multiple times in school. We had Bible class. Went to Sunday school here and there too. And, around 19 or so, just the short version, bounced around a lot of different ideas. Was atheist for a tiny bit, was, Buddhist for a tiny bit, and so on. But as I got involved with the bookstore, fast forwarding, a little more, all these resources here, all these materials, we have the Quran, we have the Book of Mormon, we have the we have the Bhagavad Gita and all more, all the in-between texts too, and all the extra stuff. We've got ceremonial magic, we've got all this stuff. And just to speak about the bookstore, we've got to talk about the guy who owned it before me, before my brother and I. It's a Hungarian immigrant who escaped communism, came to America, lived here in the 60s, was here with the whole hippie explosion. He was an astrologer. He was a tarot reader. He did all these things. He opened up the bookstore, and, he retired when he was about 82 or 83 when we took the store over in 2022. And that gentleman, his name's Tamaj, he always stayed Christian. He was a Christian mystic. I think that's how he'd most accurately term himself. His master before him, like his direct, spiritual guru, was also a Christian mystic. And he was a vegetarian. So he's a Christian vegetarian, ran the greatest metaphysical bookstore in Florida for 50 years, 1972, 2022.
Wow.
John Lennon used to come into this bookstore. And, it was a kind of a staple of West Palm Beach, right over the bridge from Trump's house. One of Trump's wives used to come get readings in this bookstore. So
which one?
I believe
Marla
Ivanka.
Maples?
Maybe,
but I think it was Ivanka or Ivana. Which one's the mom?
Ivana is the mom.
Ivana, I believe.
Oh, okay. Because Marla Maples she's more of a Jewish mystic, a Kabbalistic mystic, but kind of a Christian mystic as well. And I've met her a few times. She's an incredibly sweet lady and super tapped in. Mm-hmm. So I wouldn't be surprised if she had frequented that bookstore as well, because she lives in Florida too.
Well, when you say that, it makes it more likely that it could have been her. I wasn't listening too
Trump's had a
closely,
lot of
but
wives, man.
yeah, and one of his daughters is an astrologer. I know that much. I didn't know that about Marla. Thank you, but so he's been here for 50 years. He's seen it all. He saw the hippie movement come and go. He saw the Buddhist, like Hindu, tie-dye hippie jam band revival come and go, and all this stuff, and he stayed straight and narrow Christian, vegetarian Christian. And my background was Christian. I went vegetarian when I was 18 just because I had a friend who is such a good example, healthiest guy I ever met, never had to convince me, never had to push me. He led by example. I wanted to be as healthy and fit as him. But I was already vegetarian when I came into contact with this bookstore, and just meeting Tamaj, the previous owner, it's just so reassuring. It's such a testament to the vegetarian diet. This guy is as close to a wizard or a mystic or, like a church father type figure that you can get. He's bearded, he's old, he's got the European accent, and he was vegetarian the whole time. Now, why Christianity? He was Christian. He really showed me you can go deep in all these subjects and stay Christian. In fact, it's probably the best route to go because it's the best armor. I don't think you can be armored against darkness the same way. Dabbling with the occult and metaphysics, people don't realize how guarded these things used to be, by protection of death,
Yeah.
So getting into all these things, even tarot, astrology, all that, it can get messy if you don't know what's on the other side. So just learning the emphasis of making sure you're as close to a divine pathway straight with the one good God in heaven as possible. You don't want to be dealing with these lesser spirits and the lesser entities. So like I said, I dabbled with ceremonial magic, all this stuff, and Tamaj, the previous owner, he really helped show me, a lot of these routes, these paths, they're just cul-de-sacs. You go down them.
Yeah.
There might be some great stuff down there, but you got to come back down the same path, get back on the main highway, and So he was Christian. He was always Christian, and he dove deep into all these things. He showed me that I could too, and that reaffirmed my, faith, not just in Jesus and Christianity, but that I could do what I wanted to do and still be Christian. And actually, I think it's the greatest saving grace, because my friends who aren't Christian who get into this stuff, not to speak ill, but sometimes you see it all over the place. YouTube, people get swept up. They have no foundation. They have no belief in the one good God in heaven. It's always spirits. It's always universe. It's always source. So I just felt protected from that with Christianity. And then, why am I Christian? Another way that I was convinced, to kind of dumb it down, is the oldest religion on earth is Hinduism. So they claim, right?
Yeah.
Well, what do they think of Jesus? They hold him in equal regard, if not higher, to some of their key figures. Krishna.
Yeah.
Sometimes they identify him with Krishna himself. They'll say he's an avatar, not the Kalki avatar, but the one before, and so on. Some of, probably my favorite Hindu mystic guru is Neem Karoli Baba.
Same.
The Maharaji.
Yeah.
And talk about, I heard
Big fan
about
of Jesus.
the guy who got me to go vegetarian. That was his path of choice. And so when he told me the stories about Ram Das and, Krishna Das and these guys going over to India to study with this guy, to devote their time, months and months, if not years, to this guy, they would ask him things. This great Hindu mystic, they'd be tugging on his sleeves. What's the secrets to enlightenment? How do we become like you? How do we get to your level? What's the meaning of life? Everything like that. He would oftentimes ignore them. Sometimes he'd curse at them. Sometimes, but when he'd really want to get through to them, he'd look them in the eye and say, Jesus Christ. Be like Christ. Feed people and be like Christ. So, two of his most core tenets, teachings. Can you imagine with those, Jewish intellectuals who'd been dropping acid in America? Can you imagine how dumbfounded they were when they go all the way to the other corner of the world, soul
Yeah.
searching? They go up into the mountains, they go deep into the jungles, they make it to the ashram, and then Jesus Christ is the answer. How's that for a story? And things like that always stood out to me. You can't
Yeah.
ignore that. It's striking.
Connor, have
So,
you heard Ram Dass tell the story of when he first met Neem Karoli Baba and he gave him the LSD and all that?
yeah,
Do you remember what he says to them about when the whole group finally gets there? They make him take the acid again, and again nothing happens. And when Ram Dass told his devotees, none of them believed him. Like, oh, he must have tricked you. But he did it again with like 3 tabs of acid, and he chewed it up and went like, nah, and showed everybody the acid on his mouth.
right.
And then he swallows it, and nothing changes at all. And so they start saying like, Maharaj, how is this possible? And he says, our people have known about these kinds of medicines for thousands of years.
Yeah.
He says, they're very good. He said, they bring you into the room with Christ, but you cannot stay. They'll eventually kick you out. He said, so better to become Christ was his big lesson.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, that's ultimate. That's
so gangster.
Yeah. And things like that. So just to dumb it down is to say they hold Jesus as high as what they have, if not higher sometimes, because he's more recent, because he's building on what they already put out. They recognize that. So all these great Hindu mystics, saints, gurus, that's just one. That's just one of my favorite. You've got hundreds who not only will have statues of Jesus, they adore him, they revere him. So Hinduism, as good as what we've got, if not better, they'll sometimes go as far as to say. Then what about Buddhism? Buddhism steps out of Hinduism. What do they say? So someone like Thich Nhat Hanh, he goes as far as to identify, people like him goes far as to identify Buddha with Jesus and say Jesus was his version of the Buddha. That was the Buddha for that time, that place. And again, they'll say, as good as what we've got, if not sometimes better, because he's more recent. He's building on what the Buddha's already offered. And that's two of the big ones. And people really think that they're getting something new with this Eastern spirituality, the Eastern mysticism. Oftentimes it's just a turnaround and it slingshots you right back, But Islam, again, we've got a big Islam section here. What does Islam say? They don't always like to admit it because they don't like Christianity so much. But in the Quran, Jesus or Isa is named many, many times. We have them often giving him more superpowers than he has in the Bible, right? Like making toys come to life and things like that. And I believe in the Quran, they say Jesus didn't even die the way we understand that God brought him up off the cross before the actual moment of death. And it couldn't help but jump out to me that Jesus is brought straight up to heaven and Muhammad dies of poisoning, much like the Buddha. Not that we should judge someone by how they go, but there's just an undeniable glory in that. Where the Buddha
legends they tell.
The Buddha died from poisoning. Muhammad is said to have, possibly died from poisoning. It may have been flesh too. That's something that's often said, is the Buddha was typically vegetarian, but he ate flesh because one of his tenets was, if someone offers you food, no matter what's in it, just eat it. It's worse to offend than it is to eat the negative karma, right? Well,
sounds like Paul.
It seems, and it seems like he had to eat those words later on because he went outside of his typical diet to have some pork, the Buddha, and he died because of it. Now, it's believed that Muhammad often abstained from flesh, but it was likely a flesh meal that he died of poisoning. So, do with that what you will. but that stood out to me. And the fact that Jesus is elevated straight to heaven, spared the painful death, the wrongful death in their eyes, right?
Yeah.
And then also they go as far as to say Jesus sits with God in heaven, and they say he is the Messiah. They say he will come again, and
He's
that
going to return.
he actually judges from heaven. And I do not believe Muhammad is given that office. So
Yeah.
just the reverence, even for people who have distaste for Jesus or Christians, they oftentimes can't hide it. You know, it's embedded deep down. And the pure vein you take down into any one of these spiritual paths, it seems the closer to Jesus you get. So those are just three examples, but I've looked into, you know, Hermeticism and, like I said, Mormonism and things like that. And everything points to Jesus. And with the occult, there's no greater armor and spiritual protection than Jesus. Demons don't run at the name of Buddha and Muhammad. Maybe they do, I don't know. But they jolt at the name of Jesus. So Yeshua, whatever you want to say it, but you know, that's the idea.
Yeah.
So things like that stood out to me, and I'm convinced. If you wanna go down any one of those.
Yeah. I would like to. I'd love to hear your thoughts on what my experience has been like, and if it's been similar to yours in terms of jumping over to the Eastern traditions for a time and studying all the amazing stuff that's in the Eastern traditions, but sort of like ultimately feeling like there's something still wanting in your spiritual philosophy, and you just keep getting drawn back to the teachings of Jesus. That was obviously my experience. People on my channel already know my story, but after leaving Christianity, just went heavy into Hinduism, especially, and some Buddhism and Taoism, and studied non-duality for 7 or 8 years, like almost exclusively. And it was very good for me because, you know, Christianity, growing up in evangelicalism, my theology and ontology and metaphysics were like non-existent, right? No understanding of what God really is, and theology was a mess. So I wanted like a system that could lay out a consistent ontology and metaphysics of God that wasn't so contradictory. And Eastern traditions gave me that, right? So super thankful for that. But what I ultimately ended up craving was the kind of heart-based devotional relationship to the Creator, the bhakti yoga, you know,
Right.
that the Eastern kind of more masculine-oriented, like knowledge-based traditions don't really emphasize too much. And then as I started studying Jesus more again and weaving in the Eastern philosophy, you know, I'm 10 or so years now down my spiritual path outside of Christianity. And what I started to notice happening in myself was that I gained so much knowledge of especially non-duality that my mind, my ego, or whatever would start to use those concepts against me. And I would get so obsessed with learning more. And it led me into a lot of spiritual problems that only were solved once I came back to sort of my original home base, right? Which was the teachings of Jesus. And I really started to see, hey, Yeshua's, you know, soteriology is completely different than what Christianity teaches. He emphasized good works, righteous living, loving God with all your heart, loving your neighbor as yourself, forgive everyone, judge no one. These kind of staple spiritual virtues that, again, like the Eastern traditions don't really talk about forgiveness much, at least not that I've ever come across, or repentance, or, you know, there's karma yoga in Hinduism, do good service and all that. It's just not really an emphasis. And when you study Jesus, like there's definitely some non-dual philosophy in Jesus, no doubt, right? But it's very little in comparison to his just basic moral teachings. And I almost see Jesus now as laying out clearly the best spiritual path a human can possibly adopt, because it's so embodied. It's so about living the truth, not just knowing and learning about it. And I feel like most people probably should have no business studying the deep esoteric Eastern philosophies, at least not very much, until you can just live the basic principles that Jesus laid out. You have no business studying that stuff. It's like, who cares how much knowledge you gain if you can't even love your neighbor? It's kind of a joke, right? And that's the realization I came to, that as much as I love Hinduism and I've studied all the Eastern yogis you've described and Ramana Maharshi, I still read those books and love them. but they're no longer the central core of my spiritual philosophy. It's really the Jesus way, and everything else weaves and branches off of that. So I'm curious to know if that's if you've had a similar experience studying the Eastern philosophies and found them lacking in some of those basic spiritual principles.
Yes. Yeah, that's wonderfully put. I'm definitely on the same page as a lot of that. And I'd also say that, what I mentioned before, those were kind of superficial things or just kind of at a glance, comparing the world religions. But in terms of personal experience, 100%, I often found, and it's hard to clump them all together, but just with like even Western mysticism, for example, and, looking at everything except Jesus, right? And knowledge oriented hermeticism, those types of things. You can, like you said, you can fill your head full of stuff,
Yeah.
awesome, awesome. If there's not virtue being instilled with it, it's just it's just cheat codes.
It can
You're just
become
looking,
dangerous, man.
you're looking for cheat codes.
Yeah.
God will give you exactly the wisdom, the knowledge, the learning, the family, the blessings you deserve. Not everyone wants to hear that, but chasing cheat codes is not so valid of a path. I'd say it's probably invalid, and that's why we hear people who've lived a life in the occult a lot of times turn back and say, really, it wasn't worth all the hassle. It's all the other spiritual paths. My understanding is the Eastern religions, they can be valid, but they all come with strings attached. Strings attached. They always want something from you in return, and it's not just virtue. It's not just forgiveness. It's coconut milk, or it's strawberry jam, or it's the blood of the innocent, right? So the slippery slope of paganism is one of unaccountability, inaccountability. What would the word be? So I'd see Jesus's message as personal accountability. Your sin falls on you. You know what I mean? You can't sacrifice your way out of it. You can't delight the idols out of it, right? With,
Yep.
my sweet honey cake offering, right? And you see that with Hinduism. There's a lot of cop-outs. There's a lot of buyouts. There's a lot of bribing the gods. If you want to look at it in a dumb way, I'm sure we could refine my understanding of that. There's a lot more to offerings than that, but at a glance, it's kind of what it is. It's just dumb. It's kind of seeking to affect matter with matter, right? Or seeking to affect immaterial things with material offerings. God doesn't need a honey cake, presented before him, right? It's the essence. It's the essence that he's, yearning for from us, right? It's the recognition.
Yeah.
And yeah, I'd say, the slippery slope of paganism and other world religions is that you think God or Mother Nature needs something from you. At first, it's just a honey cake or the first fruits. Well, the slippery slope is the next year, the weather's not good and the harvest isn't good. What do we need to sacrifice now? It's a crab, it's a squirrel, it's a bug. The next year, the weather's not good, harvest isn't good. It's going to be an animal. And you see where this is going, Next year, it's not good. The animal needs to get bigger offering, more impressive offering. The culture starts to romanticize it and glorify it. Next thing you know, you're sacrificing hundreds of thousands of cattle. The weather's still bad. And you're looking at the virgins in your society like, well, you're next.
What's more valuable than a cow? We got these virgins.
Exactly. That's the slippery slope, and it's a mind virus that has infected every culture around the world. So, like I said before we hopped on, I think Jesus is the Messiah, the savior of every world religion. He just happened to be born into a Judahite family, so to say. But it's the mind virus, the sacrifice, the delaying accountability or deferring it, depositing your sin into something else. It's a mind virus. It's invalid. It's futile to an extent.
Spiritual bypassing.
Yes. So I was very averse to cheat codes and things like that, and I've always felt if you're not as virtuous as you can be, that's you're losing at the end of the day. You're losing.
Mhm.
And I'd
Yeah.
also say that when I found out about the real, the power structures that rule the world, the royal families, Illuminati, whatever you want to call these people, synagogue of Satan, I think is a pretty fair description of the accurate of the real issue. But um, when I found out about the real families who rule the world, I was shocked. I was floored. I thought it was the New World Order. I thought it was the Illuminati. Thought it was, the Vatican. People say, oh, it's the Swiss bank. It's this, it's that.
So many theories. Yeah.
But I found out in all my researching, I found out who the real royal families are. The real ones. It's not the Medici's. It's not the Farneses. You guys want to take a couple guesses? They're up there.
Rothschilds?
They eclipse these people. Eclipse them.
I've heard this, but yeah, keep going.
These are the real Illuminati bloodlines that trump them all. When I found this out, I was rattled. Forever, could never work a normal job after this. And this is who all the Illuminati answers to. This is who all of them answer to. The Vatican, the Orthodox Jews, you name it. Lump them all in there. The families who really run the world, who put out all the orders, gluttony, lust, wrath, pride. What's the other one?
Sloth,
yeah,
envy,
envy.
That's
false accusations. Yeah,
it's an energy. Yeah,
those
it's
are
an energy these people gravitate towards, and they're just swept up in the momentum of these negative thought forms.
Those are the 7 families which rule the world. And they are families because those little vices breed other vices. But those 7 families, all the New World Order, all of them, all the power structures, all the evil, they are evil. They are what they are because they submit to those vices. They give in to those vices more than the average person, much less than the righteous person. If you can conquer those 7 vices, you can conquer all of them, and you will conquer the New World Order, right? You can't control what's on TV and this and that. You can control what goes in your mouth. You can control somewhat what goes in your eyes and your ears, but you can definitely control what goes in your mouth,
Oh, yeah.
That's the first step. That's the only step to take. It's the only step to take in the only right direction. It's all personal accountability. So the spiritual accountability, it's the same as the, what you're eating. You're accountable for what goes in your mouth, right? That's top to bottom. It's a holistic approach. And I think Jesus reinforces it more than anybody. All this spirituality, it's nothing but air. Spirit is air. Respiration, inspiration. It's air. It's empty.
Yeah.
Religion is the fire. Religion is the real passion. And people are allergic towards like religion for some reason. If you want to hear the most pretentious, drawn out, nonsense in the world, just ask the average person what they think of religion. And boy, oh boy, will you get, a whole bunch of slop. Because people just hate it and they don't know why. They had some bad experiences. They think, when I look at the word religion, and I'm big on words, I see the word rely. To rely. To rely. To defer, to submit a little bit. But there's an air of people just hate authority. And God is the ultimate authority. They'd rather go to something else, these lesser spirits, these lesser spirit guides. And I don't know. It's hard to narrow it down, but that's kind of my big picture.
I've got a question about that, Connor. So, we totally agree about personal responsibility being the pathway, that we have to really engage in this battle against sin and take accountability for our actions. But what would you have to say? You were just talking about religion. Do you feel like modern Christianity in a way obfuscates personal responsibility because of the blood atonement doctrine, and you're a worthless, helpless sinner on your own.
Yeah.
And it's only your confession and belief in Jesus that saves you. It's not your own regeneration and your own overcoming of sin with, of course, the help of God. You can't do it without God. But what's your perspective about that?
Yeah, I like to use the orange juice analogy, God, the kingdom of heaven, it's like fresh squeezed, organic, unpasteurized orange juice. Can we blame the world and society and civilization for not making that the most abundant form of orange juice? Can you package that and get it to every corner of the world, perfect and pure and clean and unadulterated? I don't know if you can. So logistically, we got frozen orange juice, we got concentrate orange juice, reconstituted orange juice, all these things. Now, that orange juice, as long as it's from an orange, it's still good enough with me, and I think Jesus would agree with that. When the disciples confront Jesus and say, "Hey, there's someone out there in the wilderness or countryside speaking about you. They're claiming to be one of your disciples. They're speaking about you. They're speaking nonsense." Jesus says, "Whatever, let him do it. Let him speak the nonsense. If he's talking about me, it's ultimately going to land where it's supposed to. It's ultimately going to push people in somewhat of a right direction." So that's kind of how I look at Pauline Christianity and the big churches, Orthodoxy, Catholicism. I think that they are pasteurized, concentrated orange juice, but it's what is needed to get it to every corner of the world. So, I love the work you guys do, and it may in fact undermine my position on a lot of this, and I'm totally open to that, but I'm a King James Version Bible guy. So for me, the King James Version, that is a strong enough argument for vegetarianism. To me, that is, even using that, what many would consider adulterated and, all interpolations and so on and so on. Even with all that, do we really have that much to complain about? I'm not going to put too much blame on the church. I think it's wonderful that the fact that they can organize and things like that. And, Paul had a vision of religion taking over the Roman Empire. The family of Jesus had no concept of that whatsoever, right? But at the end of the day, why did God bless Paul's vision and his path? And I don't hate Paul. I understand the issue and the critiques and so on. My understanding is that James's version of Christianity could not have pushed out into every corner of the earth and dominated other civilizations. And say what you want about ends justify the means. I'm not saying this is my judgment or what, but I think God chose the type of Christianity that was big and strong and wanted to expand and was hungry, right? And I think that big bully of a Christianity made enough room for the grassroots, real, original stuff to kind of stay alive under the canopy of that long enough, and I'm satisfied. I'm grateful that we've ever even heard of the Essenes and the Nazarenes, and the early church fathers, all kind of took a swing at explaining vegetarianism and Christianity, and some of them came out with pro vegetarian, diehard vegetarian. Some of them come out with anti-vegetarian. I'm okay with that ecosystem, of thoughts and ideas, because it's an ecosystem that does not allow for animal sacrifice. And I'm with you about the blood atonement, and Paul devised this pagan blood rite out of Jesus's death. I think that's precisely the language and the vocabulary that was needed to interface with these pagan cultures around the world, to get them off of things like that. This is the type of Christianity that was converting actual human sacrificers. So I think Paul was almost meeting them halfway and using the vocabulary of a human sacrificer, of a blood sacrificer, to win people over and wean them off of this bloody culture. Now, clearly, he disagreed with the diet, but at least he got the prohibition of animal sacrifice more or less right. I could be wrong on
Mhm.
that,
Yep.
but God bless
No, I think you're right.
Christianity for diverting and going away from that. So I'm happy with the dumbed down versions. I've met many great Catholics. I've learned a lot from Catholics and Orthodox and Protestants. But yeah, I can talk about what my issues with Paul are, and I think you guys enumerate them
Yeah,
better than
yeah.
I. But that's my
Well,
understanding.
I would like to get into that if you're open.
Totally.
It's interesting, Connor, because we haven't actually done like a standalone episode on Paul yet, and we definitely will. But this is like another example of what I said at the beginning, that we keep finding people like you that have come to these same conclusions in your own personal research. And so, like, you and I have never talked about this subject before, but everything you just explained, like, I very much have come to the same conclusions. And I would like to hear your thoughts on this conclusion I've come to, which is that to me, Paul clearly had a lot of problems with the Orthodox Judaism of the day. That's why he was very like, no one's saved by works of the law. By works of the law can no one attain salvation. He talks against works of the law and all these kinds of things. And he's against circumcision and a lot of Jewish customs, Paul, like, as we know, kind of condemned as unnecessary. And he doesn't, I don't think he like outright mentions animal sacrifice much in his letters, but I think what Paul's mission was let's be honest, right? By the first century, like, this practice had gone on for so long, had gotten so out of hand that I'm sure everybody, including Orthodox Jews who kind of believed that, well, this is the way God wants, even them, I bet, were people were just disgusted by this practice at this point. When you've got, every Passover, you've got 250,000 lambs being slaughtered, like 250,000 lambs being murdered in a day. Just imagine the stench, the smell, the blood everywhere, as Josephus describes, and I think Tacitus describes blood running out of the temple all the way down to the Dead Sea. Just imagine the stink, man. So you can imagine people had a lot of internal frustration of like, when do we have to stop doing this, And then Paul comes along and he clearly had problems with Orthodox Judaism and probably thought, oh, this is the most convincing message to get rid of this disgusting temple system that all of us hate and don't want to participate in. Jesus ended it all. He was the last animal sacrifice. And see, it's this great compromise, right? Where he's not coming out and saying, the Orthodox Jews were wrong. God doesn't want blood sacrifice, because a lot of Jews would have hated that. Even Gentile Jews in the diaspora would have hated that. So he had to marry the two and say, yeah, God ordained the slaughtering of bulls and goats, but now that Christ has come, we've been set free by the blood of Jesus. So it's like, you get to have your cake and eat it too. I think that was a part of Paul's mission, right? Is like, let's get rid of this thing we all hate and don't like. But in doing that, in that compromise he had to make, I think both to himself and everyone listening, right? He preserved this idea, this pagan idea, that you can appease the gods or God by the murder of innocent sentient beings, that the creator of heaven and earth is actually pleased with murder and violence and says, I love the smell of a dead flesh. And that is the tradition that the Essenes and Nazarenes rejected. And the Church of James, as you mentioned, is trying to preserve what they believed was the original form of Judaism before it was corrupted with paganism. And so can you say a little bit about that? Wherever you want to go with it is fine, but kind of the Paul issue and then the Essenes emerging out of that.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a wonderful track to go down, because I see Paul's kind of concoction as the solution to a problem, but like you're saying, what's that problem? How do we get into that problem? And it's a universal problem, like we've already said. Every culture seemed to have slipped into this mind virus. In my personal studies using the King James Version Bible, I really look to Noah's Ark as the point where something infected the consciousness of man. And, we could take this another route and talk about the pagan element and how it's universal, but Noah's Ark is also somewhat of a universal story in itself. In Genesis, we see Noah is given somewhat of an additional commandment. that kind of builds on the original dominion and stewardship we see in Genesis 1:28, followed up, clarified, qualified by the following verse, Genesis 1:29, fruit and herb bearing seed will be the food, right? So dominion with the diet prescription, we have a vegetarian human creation, the original factory settings of man. And that holds true all the way to Noah. And it's mentioned that there's wickedness on the earth, but it doesn't really mention that there was a carnivore diet. I know we've heard about ripping flesh and wickedness and some insinuations, but we are not shown in anything close to an explicit carnivore or pro-flesh or allowing for flesh diet until Noah's Ark. And Noah gets on the ark, and he's given somewhat of an additional commandment that builds on the Genesis commandment, one of man's first commandments, to take care of, to have dominion, to have stewardship. Noah's still under that commandment, and he's given another, which is pretty much to keep them safe on the ark, to keep everything safe on the ark. When it sets down, keep it safe from there on too. When they disembark, it seems, it's written that Noah builds an altar and makes the first sacrifice. Some people say Cain and Abel. There's no bloodshed in Cain and Abel. There's no altar. There's no slaughter. There's no bloodshed. It's with Noah that we see the first explicit bloodshed sacrifice, dead animal, right? And also Cain and Abel, because I know you guys talk about this too, especially in debates, it comes up so much. For me, Cain and Abel, it's the lesson there is the first criminal act. There's nothing to do with diet. And clearly it's according to the Noahide laws and Genesis 1:29, in between there, apparently they're both vegetarian. So people love to say the first murderer was a vegetarian. The first murder victim was a vegetarian, and that grew in the conscience of man to become, the first criminal act, or it's the representation of the first criminal act. It's like a dad comes home from work and his two sons are there. He's like, kids, how productive have you been today? And Cain's sitting over there. He's still dreaming about the Garden of Eden. He's still stuck playing with fruit, He hasn't progressed much. He's not industrious. Abel's industrious. He's working with the lambs, the sheep. He's got, he's probably building some coats, right? They've got weather now that they're out of the Garden of Eden. Cain's being lazy. He's got a bad attitude. That's all it's about. Abel's got a good attitude. He's being industrious. He's working, he's shepherding. And shepherding's clearly a righteous profession in the eyes of God. He's not a butcher. He's not butchering, he's not the first butcher, or we would know him as the first butcher and the first barbecuer. It's Noah who made the first barbecue. Barbecue is actually a Florida word, by the way. It comes from the Indians of Florida. But Noah gets off the ark. We can sympathize with him a little bit. If this is a real, literal story, the world would have been devastated, Yeah. He might not have had the plant foods available to him that he did before. He might not have had the nice incenses and oils that God seems to adore and revere and love later on in the Old Testament. Mm-hmm. So what did he do? Just like Cain and Abel, they didn't know what they were doing was wrong. This is the first learned crime. This is the first lesson in this area of human life. So we can't blame Noah too hard. We can make a lot of excuses or say, what happened, but he does it. He makes an altar, he sacrifices the animals, and Aaron, maybe this is a total interpolation, but like I said, I don't want a vegan Bible. This is a real problem that sprouted up somewhere in history, and I'm okay I'm okay with them putting it back as far as Noah's Ark. That's probably accurate. Noah
Can I ask
gets
you a
off
question
the ark.
on that?
Totally.
I'm curious if in your studies, Conor, do you believe that the flood of Noah that's described was the Younger Dryas extinction event?
I wasn't there. Okay. I can't say I know for sure. I'm not a big Younger Dryas guy. I'm not a big catastrophism guy. I think it's more or less, if we want to like evolutionize it and like, make it, frame it kind of in a geological or evolutionary light, it's probably what rose the sea levels after the ice age. And that could be the Younger Dryas, it could be volcanic,
Mm,
it could be the vapor canopy falling down. I've heard
yeah.
a lot of theories. I'm not going to say I'm swayed on any one, but here in Florida, we've got the largest, deepest, and highest magnitude freshwater spring in the world, Wakulla Springs. There's one or two others that are close also in Florida. When God says he opened the fountains of the deep, would have been something like that, just oozing water up from below. So
Mm.
raining, water coming up from below. If you're in a low-lying area, I mean, you're toast pretty quick. 24 hours of rain, that's most of Florida's like gone. Kind of, not really, but I wish I had a better clear cut, this is what I think happened, but I'm not
Yeah.
convinced on any one of the explanations. I just say that the thing that jumps out to me is it lines up with the end of the Ice Age, the flood,
Mhm.
the end
Yeah.
of the Ice
Yeah. Totally.
Age, and the fall of Atlantis seem to have all been describing the same process. So
Yeah.
that's all I can really say with certainty. Is I'm not a big Younger Dryas guy. I'm not sold on the meteor impacts or flaming, things falling down from heaven. In that instance, things certainly fall down from heaven later on in the Bible, but I think this is more just a how would you say this, hydrological process. It's just water. It's melting ice. It's something like that. But
Yeah, yeah. I'm with
but
you. I don't know for sure what the causation was, and I've watched only a little bit on it from Graham Hancock and whatnot. So I don't
yeah,
know what caused this kind of global flooding event to happen. It definitely seems to be tied into the end of the ice age and the polar ice caps melting for some reason. But I think like the bigger premise is there was clearly the evidence seems clear to me that there was some kind of global flooding event.
oh yeah,
And in terms of how humanity went from this Garden of Eden state, vegetarian diet, and then all of a sudden killing, eating, and sacrificing animals like worldwide,
mhm,
if you try to put yourself in the very human position, which you sort of described a minute ago, Connor, you survive this catastrophe. I don't know how long it was. I want to say I've heard it was like 1,000 and something days of like
so
crazy global flooding and all that. And then
the
you
flood.
emerge out of that. What's that?
The flood was about 370. Noah was inside the ark for about 370 days, apparently.
Okay.
Yeah.
Nice. So like you said, you emerge out of this flooding event and the whole world has been kind of wiped clean. Most, animal life dead and vegetation destroyed. Like now you're in this scarce kind of wasteland where it's this great reset on planet Earth. And
Yeah.
there's probably not much you can eat other than animals. Like I would struggle to think of vegetarian foods that would be available
Yep.
after a year-long flood. Like there'd be
Yep.
literally no vegetation. And so you can
Yeah.
imagine out of necessity, these people had to eat animals for a while. And you can even think of like if it was a spiritual philosophy for them to not consume animal flesh, and then they're in this predicament where they're like, we literally have no choice, that they would make
Mhm.
that concession and say, okay, well, we're going to get back to vegetation as fast as we can, but for survival reasons, let's eat meat for a while.
Mhm.
And then, it just kind of slippery slopes and you go forward a couple thousand years and then like every culture in the world is eating meat, sacrificing animals. It could be something that simple that just kind of began
Yeah.
the slippery slope. So I'm curious if that's kind of your theory on it too.
Totally. Totally. That's a big part of it. I'd also say that what had they just witnessed? They get off the ark. I mean, God just sacrificed like most of the world. And
Right.
how can
Right.
you understand that? I mean, we are very small and feeble-minded compared to, what God's grand plan is, but can you relate to someone who just says, "Well, you just come on, man, you just killed the whole planet. I can't just nick one off and, barbecue it," or uh, you know, also Noah brought food on the ark. He's eating all that food the whole time they're in the ark. They got to feed the animals too. They got to
Yeah.
feed the animals too. So, yes, there is an issue, a dilemma in the sacrifice. There's also a beautiful lesson in Noah's Ark because we get a glimpse, not only like a nostalgic glimpse like a flashback to the Garden of Eden, where all the animals are in this ark coexisting. Apparently,
Yeah.
according to the church fathers, their predatory instincts were dropped, lowered for the time, for the duration of the flood. And that's a beautiful lesson right there. I've got some quotes here from these, the Chabad Lubavitch branch of Orthodox Judaism. They teach that from one of their books or website. They teach, quote, Noah's Ark evoked the time of the future redemption, when the wolf will dwell with the lamb and the leopard shall crouch with the kid. In the words
Wow.
of Orthodox chief rabbi and Baron, like the office, the title Baron, Jonathan Sachs, quote, the lesson of Noah's Ark is that wolves can lie down with lambs. So why should we focus on the sacrifice element? And I do, and I love to explain it and understand it. But there's this wonderful lesson of the animals being side by side. We're given another opportunity to see that it's possible that the wolf and the lamb can lay down. The lion can eat straw if he needs to, And but okay, Noah gets off the ark, he makes the sacrifice. This is my understanding. It's not written, so I am kind of reading into this, and it's in a personal interpretation, but we're not given the identity of the serpent in the garden until later. Right? It just says serpent. In Greek, I think it says dragon. Right? In Hebrew, it's what, Nakash or something like that, right?
For serpent?
Yeah,
Nachash. Yeah.
Nahash. Yeah. So we're not told who that is. We're not even told it's a deity yet. It's only later on in the Bible do we hear words like Lucifer and Satan getting thrown around. That is, and then people identify it with the serpent. So a lesson there is that man can be influenced negatively, and we don't always necessarily see by who, right? There might be a beacon or like an emissary, like the serpent in that instance. But what compelled Noah to sacrifice this animal? Because it wasn't God. It was not the one good God in heaven. And as we see later on, right, in what is it, Jeremiah, where it says, never commanded sacrifices,
Yep. Jeremiah
And
7:21.
yeah. So God doesn't command the sacrifice. So Noah does something. Now God notices a smell. And we got to sympathize here. We've got to, use imagination. This is like the first barbecue on planet Earth. God smelling, it doesn't say that God saw it or he heard it. God's omnipotent. He knows everything. But the way it's written, he smells this and it's fragrant. God looks down. And then it's in Genesis. It's amazing how people miss this. God clearly admonishes Noah. All it says was that the fragrance was pleasant. Everything after that, God is cracking a whip on Noah. He's essentially saying, I chose you. I thought you were perfect. I thought this was the one family. And I give you this big task. You're still under the commandment to have stewardship and dominion over the animals. I gave you another task to keep them safe on the ark. What's the first thing you do when you get off? You sacrifice one of them, if not more. And God admonishes Noah and says, the Noahide laws it's not a great, glorious new reset. This is like, he's lowering the bar. He's angry at Noah. He says, now the dread of you, the fear of you will be in the heart of every animal. And it's also a callback to Cain and Abel, because he says, when Cain slays Abel, this goes back to the adrenochrome element too, is God doesn't smell it, or he doesn't hear it, he doesn't see it. He tastes the screams in the blood that dripped into the ground with Cain and Abel.
Yeah.
So just, if that's not a biblical definition of adrenochrome, I don't know what is. He tasted the screams of the blood that fell down into the ground. That's powerful imagery. And for Noah to get off the ark, and he does the same thing pretty much. It's a new thing. It's a new act. It's a new smell. God smells it. He looks down. He's pretty shocked at what he sees, and he punishes him. The animals are not your friend anymore. Gone are the days of Bambi and getting along with them, and probably had like a telepathic connection with the animal, something like that. That shit's gone. You're gonna hunt. You want to play dress up? You want to play tough guy? You want to play butcher?
Yeah.
You're gonna be chasing these things for the rest of eternity. They're not gonna look at you like friends. Man had never done anything like that, according to the biblical narrative. So whatever. Noah gets off the ark. He does the sacrifice. I think he welcomed something in to the hearts of man in that moment. That's the point that I look at as the origin of not only Abrahamic rooted sacrifice, but also pagan sacrifice. There's a universal flood myth. There's a universal sacrifice demon that plagues the human consciousness.
Yeah.
So I think Noah welcomed that in, and I think God rightfully punishes and lowers the bar on Noah. The Noahide laws do mention not eating blood, so there's clearly still a prohibition on blood that most people just don't. A lot of people like to use the Old Testament to justify their habits. Oh, well, these are clean, those aren't. Well, it's dripping in blood no matter what. You shouldn't be eating it.
Yep.
And just to talk about who is this, or why did people get caught up in this? Personally, I think it's Satan. I think it's Saturn. I think the Jewish orthodoxy is pretty upfront about this. They worship on Saturn's day. They use a yarmulke that reflects or represents the hexagon on the North Pole of Saturn. The planet Saturn has a yarmulke, a hexagonal,
That's crazy.
six-sided yarmulke on the North Pole of its head, and the rings of Saturn. The rings, the goat ears. Like the peyote, whatever they call them, and a lot of this is Saturnian. They're not the only ones. Look at the Pope. He's got the yarmulke on too. Go look at the Imam, or whatever the top guy in Islam is. He's got the same damn thing. They're smothering the crown chakra. The crown chakra corresponds to Saturn. This is Saturn. It's Kronos. It's the god of space, time, area, material world. So when the Bible says Satan is the lord of this world, it's talking about Saturn. Saturn and his consort, Rhea. This is a little, like mystical Christianity. It's a little abstract or astrological, but Satan is Saturn. And Satan is a spirit. He's everywhere. He can be one place. He can be everything, but he has a beacon in the heavens in the form of the planet, Saturn. That's why Lucifer is the planet Venus, the tempter, the seducer. It's the planet Venus. Saturn, Satan.
Morning star.
These are the two bad guys. Venus is like the waiter at the restaurant. He's trying to get you put more on your tab. Oh, have you tried the fish? Have you tried the vice? Have you tried the gluttony and the wrath? Oh, it's delicious tonight. Saturn's the one who you're paying the bill to at the end. Saturn's the one who lays down the
debt
law.
collector.
Yep, the karmic arbiter. He's like he's the angel of death, you could say too. And Saturn goes by multiple names in the Old Testament. Moloch is one of them. Moloch is the same as saying Loki, Moloch, Kronos, Saturn, same guy. He pops up in different forms. We extinguish one type of demon worship, another one pops up with a different name, right? But I think Noah was getting tangled up with Saturn, Shatan, Satan, however you want to say it. And it didn't go identified. The same way that the serpent goes unidentified in the garden. Only later is it identified with Lucifer or Satan. Whatever it was that was, compelling Noah to engage in this behavior. It might have been scarcity, might have been, a need, but I think it was something more insidious. I think it was something using the new scary conditions to weasel its way into the life of men, and that seems to be Satan. All blood sacrifice goes to Satan. There's no such thing
All.
as black magic. Blood magic is black magic. Black
Yeah.
magic
Yeah.
is blood magic. That's the one of the ultimate truths I've learned in all this. Reading about
Yeah.
ceremonial magic, it's not really black magic until it's blood magic. Even
Yes.
if you have great intentions and you're spilling blood, you're slitting, you're doing whatever, you're making a pigeon do it for you, whatever it is, that's evil. It's
Yes.
futile, and you will only get rewarded for that in this world, because Satan is the
Mhm.
lord of this world. So,
Yeah.
on one hand, sacrifice works. It's like a patch on the tire. It's like taking out a loan from a bank. So Noah takes out a loan from a bank, and actually, Aaron and James and Cam, he makes this great point about mankind learning the mass surveillance state, like the mass surveillance state being developed with the beef industry. Every head of cattle is RFID chipped and vaxxed and all this, and that's where we get it from. That's the microcosm that we're now expanding and walking into and making a macrocosm. It's disgusting. But what's crazy is Noah is also where we learn about debt. The disease, which is the sacrificial system in every culture, is the concept of debt, that you owe Mother Earth or God something beyond virtue for what
Yeah.
he gives you. Like he didn't put you here to live your life on purpose, like you have to pay your whole way for it. And every mistake you make, there's a price of fruit, there's a price of blood, slippery slope. But Noah learned debt in this instance. And this is why I think it's Saturn coming in. Because when Noah sacrifices the animal, God says, "Oh, well, you think you're a butcher now. Well, now I'm going to demand more from you." It's like siphoning out gas from a car. You suck out a little bit, it's all coming out. You know what I mean? You can't stop the flow, really, right? It's all
Mhm.
coming.
It's
It
like
only
Pandora's.
takes exactly. It only takes a little bit of welcoming that in for the momentum to just start avalanching the slippery slope. Um, Noah has a debt placed on him. God says, "Well, you just took out a loan without permission. Now you're going to have to pay that loan back. But guess what? This is where interest comes in. You can't pay it back. You have to keep sacrificing and keep sacrificing. It goes on for generations and generations. So
Yeah.
God is clearly admonishing and punishing Noah, and it goes right over most Christians' heads. There's clearly God didn't want it. Noah's punished for it, and most Christians think it's a good thing that Noah made the first sacrifice. And again, we can sympathize and say scarcity played a role, but the essence of demonic sacrifice
Yeah.
and debt both entered the lives of man in that instance, according to the Bible. So that's
I
where
agree.
I see it.
We've made this argument on the pod before that how can it make any sense that there's no question that all satanic, Luciferian, black magic type arts rely on blood magic. It all revolves around the usage of blood and sacrifice.
Yeah.
So how does it make any sense to say, oh yeah, and the supreme loving God of the universe is exactly like Satan in that regard? God also needs blood sacrifices.
Yeah.
That right there is just absolutely logically absurd. But it makes you wonder why Christians look at this as a good thing when it's so antithetical to the message of the Hebrew Bible and who Jesus is.
Mhm.
And it's got to go back to this idea that what you're talking about with Noah and this great reset, that at some point the consciousness of man just shifted and we
Mhm.
lost this Edenic consciousness of love and compassion for all sentient beings and believed like, oh man, if God destroyed the world in a flood, he must be angry at us. And so how do we appease that anger? And so I think a lot of it comes down to just not understanding ontology and natural law, that like, no, there's no being in the sky who's just like choosing what buttons to press and what to do based on his mood. It's like
Right.
that flood was a karmic climax of some sort, based on whatever forces of nature. Like it was a slow incremental shift towards, some people say it was even the pole shifting, right? Like it was natural law doing what it does. It wasn't a being who got angry and killed everybody. But if you thought it was, it makes sense how your logic could follow down this path. And so if we say that, like the Gnostics did, that it was a demiurge, Yahweh is a demiurge who was trying to deceive mankind, and Christians laugh that off and say, that's impossible. There's no way we could ever be deceived by a demonic spirit like that. It's like, are you so sure? Because in all traditions, demons are spoken of as very crafty and sneaky and clever, and they know how to make your thoughts pretend like they're you and stuff. So you almost would want to ask, like, if a demon or a devil was trying to deceive you, how would you know it was a devil, right? Like, what's your tell? How would you be so confident that you would easily spot the demon and be like, oh, I'm not going to sacrifice these animals. That's a demon telling me to do that. You obviously wouldn't, because these demons are negatively polarized, higher density beings that have orders of magnitude more knowledge than humans do. It'd be like playing with a child for them to deceive humans. It'd be very easy for them, especially with the massive egos that most humans have. It'd be like pulling on puppet strings. And so this is the mistake I think all religious people make, in at least the Abrahamic religions, when thinking about the dark powers, the devil, whatever, is they think that the devil would trick you in some kind of obvious way, like a villain with a twirling mustache, hey, go kill animals. And it's like, no, what they do is they give you 90% truth and light, and they just weave in a 10% evil. And so you're so focused on the 90% of the light that you're like, oh yeah, this sounds mostly really good. This has to be good. And then you accept the 10% evil they wove into it. That's how the demonic, the negative polarity tricks humanity, is they use mostly light in their doctrines and philosophy, and they rely on your gullibility of not seeing it. And so when we look at this story you're pulling out with Noah, the Old Testament, how this pagan practice infiltrated, it's like, that's exactly what we see. We see Yahweh from the beginning never command sacrifice. It's an abomination. I do not want this. And then later it's like, well, one sacrifice couldn't hurt. And it just slowly trickles into the Bible. And so then, 1,000 years later, people are like, hey, the book says it, so it must be God. And they're not privy to the ways that the negative polarity can easily use religious scripture to completely blind humanity to these things.
And what has it morphed into? Speaking of a black magic spell, it's the greatest black magic spell in history, where we're killing 90 billion land animals per year, and everyone is eating meat 3 times a day. Immeasurable suffering. Talk about a black magic spell, and I cringe to think about the karma that humanity is creating for ourselves with this mass enslavement. But I wanted to ask you, Conor, what is the utility of all of this? What is the utility of Saturn? Why did God create Saturn? What is the purpose of all this? Because Aaron and I firmly believe there's utility in everything. Why would God make Saturn the master of this world? And what's the purpose of so much of humanity really conflating Saturn for God?
Yeah, and this discussion itself is a slippery slope. I mean, that's why the Gnostics went off, and again, you can't clump them all together, but one of the mind viruses that they were suffering from was that their good creator was a bad one, or had, never came home, went out to the
abandoned
store,
them or something.
Went out to the store for cigarettes and never came back, and now we've got, now we've got the stepdaddy instead, the bad stepdaddy. But in my mystical kind of cosmology, Saturn is the real demiurge. So Yahweh is not Saturn. Yahweh is not the demiurge. And I know people toy with those ideas. That's cool. Yahweh is the breath of life to me. It is the least consonant word. Right?
Yeah, I love that.
It's an inhale. It's an inhale and an exhale. Right? So that is the breath of life to me. When God breathed life into man, that's like the kiss of life. That is the fingers touching. It's the spark. It's the breath. It's the fire, all in one.
He breathed that life into animals as well.
That's Jehovah. That's Yahweh. We can play
Yeah.
with the acronyms and whatever, but it's all the same. Yahweh. It's where we get the word yes and Yah and Yeshua too. It's affirmative. It's
Oh
positive.
yeah.
And where do we get the word bad? Saturn. Shabbat. Shabbat. Sabbath. Bad. We get the
Mhm.
word bad from the word Sabbath. Shabbat. That's Saturn.
Interesting.
Saturn is the seventh day. It's the seven. So
Shabad.
exactly. And who is, and to your points, Aaron, and by the way, you made me think of, for the first time ever, thinking of the pole shift as like an allegorical, like spiritual concept, like man's
Inversion. Yeah.
sense of right and wrong almost flipped, and that
Wow.
was a big light bulb going off for me. So
Yeah.
thank
You
you
just
for
made
that
my
one.
light bulb go on. It's almost
Uh,
like a chicken or the egg thing. It's like, okay, if the poles shifted, which they do apparently every 6,000 years or something,
yeah,
could that cause a shift in consciousness similarly, right? Or was the shift in consciousness of humanity, killing and eating meat, eventually
right.
caused the poles to shift? Like, which one came first?
Yeah, and it doesn't have to be a globe or flat thing. We want to be respectful to all the people out there,
All
flat
belief
around.
systems.
But the North Pole did something. It teetered or it tilted, or flat around. This still holds true. But to your point, Aaron, about what's the function? Why did God set everything up this way? My understanding is that in in the Bible, God isn't creating the world alone, right? There's the one good God in heaven, and that's God. And that means a lot of things. One of those things is goat, ironically. So there's a confusion between Saturn and God, the goat. Saturn's the goat god. God is the goat because he's the
Mm.
greatest of all time. He's the most high. He's the animal which goes up highest on the mountain. And, have you ever seen a mountain goat just
Yeah, it's
run
crazy.
straight up? It always looks like CGI. It always looks
Yeah.
like CGI. It's crazy. That is what they saw and named God after. We can disagree about what God is, but God means goat. So
Well, it's like El Elyon, the Most High. It's an
that's
allegory.
it's one of the confusing elements is that we have the word goat getting thrown around, okay? But Elohim, L capital E L, is the same capital L you're going to see in Lord, right? So when we see God, it's not always Lord. Lord's not always God. Not everyone in the Bibles who's known as Lord is God. There are other people who are called God or Malak, Lord, ruler, something like that. That goes back to Moloch. So the words between ruler and Saturn, a lot of times they're very close to each other. That probably comes from the hierarchical element that Saturn is the farthest planet. It's like the highest planet in the visible solar system, or the Ptolemaic world model, whatever you use. But when we see Elohim, when God's creating the world, it's not just God by himself. It's not just the cloud or the everythingness, just slapping atoms together, right? God doesn't have fingers where he can just reach down and touch things down here and mold the clay. He has his lights. He has his heavens, right? And the signs of the zodiac, the planets, the stars, the sun, the moon. In Genesis, we see God creates the signs. He doesn't, it's not man, it's not Lucifer, it's not the devil who made the signs of the zodiac. It's God. God
Yeah.
says, let them be for signs and for seasons. Yeah, an idiot can tell the seasons apart. You need to be a little wise to tell the signs apart, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So the signs are useful. Then Psalms 19, we see the heavens declare the glory of God. Day unto day they sheweth, I don't have this right. Day unto day they uttereth speech and sheweth knowledge, something like that. There's
Mhm.
no place on earth where their words and wisdom isn't heard, where it isn't, prevailing. So we have an astrological explanation of or a biblical explanation of astrology. But who's the Elohim? one of the traditional Jewish Hebrew mystic interpretations is that there's 7 Elohim. The Elohim are the 7 masks, fingers, or actors, characters, emissaries of God. You could call them angels, some would say. They're fallen angels also, because the stars in the sky are the angels. The ones that move freely are the fallen angels. The planets that move freely, they're loosened, they're fallen, they're falling, they go wherever they want. And Venus is one of them. Lucifer is one of them, understandably. But who's El? Why is Elohim, why is El driving the bus? You know, it's El at the front. All the rest of the planets are in there. They're Elohim. El is Saturn. We know that to be true. El is one of the names for Saturn. Capital L, Lord. So many times, and I don't like to get into this too much because I don't want to go through the Bible and say, oh, that was the devil. That was God. Oh, that was the devil. It's a tricky game to play, but it's very valid that sometimes when we're seeing the Lord, we're not seeing the one good God in heaven. It's something else posing as Lord. It's something else that the Israelites think is Lord, because it's either giving them what they want in that moment, or it's, you know, answering their need, or so on. And these other things always want blood. The one good God in heaven doesn't want blood. It's these other things, usually Satan. Satan's the general of all these lesser deities. Now, El is Saturn. And in all of, you know, the world cosmologies, just for example, Greek, Kronos is the god of space and time. So chronology, chronic, you know, those words. His wife is Rhea. His wife is Rhea. So Rhea, the wife of Saturn, is where we get the word Creator. Kronos, Rhea, and Tor, their son. Thor, Arthur, Jupiter, whatever you want to call them. Kronos, Rhea, and Tor is where we get the word creation, creator. So God created the world, but he used his henchmen to help him do it. Saturn's the boss of the henchmen. Saturn's the CEO of the company. God's the owner. God owned the building. He built the whole parking lot, he built the whole world. But the CEO is Saturn. Saturn has authority to fire, hire, punish, dock your pay, but he's not the one good God in heaven. But you can understand how someone can confuse that. Have you ever been talking to someone and said, oh, my manager, or he's the boss, he's the owner, he's the manager? Sometimes they all just get slapped down into boss, you know, my lord, my higher up. So taking all that into consideration, there are instances where the Israelites believe they're talking to God. They're really talking to a Lord, not the one Lord.
Right.
And this Lord is Saturn. His wife, Rhea, rules area. It's where we get the word area. So we have space and time both go back to Saturn and his wife. So if you're subject to space and time, you're subject to Saturn's rule, Saturn's law. You know, Saturn's the Lord of this world. But everything that is not subject to space and time, that is free. That Saturn has no dominion over that whatsoever.
No jurisdiction.
No jurisdiction. So what we see with people today, and especially people who choose to worship Saturn, they are actually exchanging everlasting life. If you believe that can be diminished or reduced, they are exchanging it. They're bargaining with their everlasting life for dominion in this world. Saturn will play that game. He's a little bit of a corrupt CEO. He doesn't have the same morality and ethics as Jesus and God. And now the saving grace in this is that Jupiter is the planet of good. And before Jesus Christ ever came to this earth, mankind could best understand him, or strive to understand him, to strive to try and understand him, was to have a relationship with the planet Jupiter. This is where we get words like Jove. Jove is Jehovah. Jove is Jupiter. It's also Jehovah. Jave, Jove, right? So Jupiter is the planet of peace, abundance, forgiveness, wisdom, truth. And I know how allergic some Christians can be to hearing Jesus is a planet? What? No. This is different than your average astrotheology. Jesus is way more than a planet. He's way more than the sun. But just like Saturn or Satan has a beacon here on in the heavens, Jesus also has a beacon. And we could identify it with Jehovah. And if anything, that's the Jesus back in the Garden of Eden that's been here the whole time. It's not the man in the flesh that was born, it's what he was calling down, what he was summoning and invoking into himself. It was the essence of truth, forgiveness. And before Jesus, you could come closest to understanding that through the planet Jupiter. So Jupiter is the good guy in astrology, Saturn's the bad guy. And Saturn's the real demiurge. That's the beauty of it is, instead of framing it dualistically, good God, bad God, you've God up here. God ruled everything. God's the monad. He made everything. And then he hires 7 members of the board, right? Board of executives, right? He's got his board members. Saturn's just the chairman of the board. He's the CEO. He's the one who's, he makes executive decisions, but he did not design this. He's not the one that you want to pray to. Not at all.
So Connor, did the Most High God hire a corrupt CEO almost as a morality test for humanity? Is that the purpose of having this corrupt CEO, to challenge us and to be the tester and to refine our character?
Yeah. When you say it like that, it doesn't sound so sophisticated, but that is kind of an element is, I reject the notion that we're trapped here, we're trapped in the body, but there's a kernel of that's true. Your body is subject to Saturn. Your body is subject to the seductions of Venus. Venus is the one who says, oh, that food is delicious. That chick down the street who you're not supposed to be hanging out with, she's beautiful. It's the sweetness and the allure. That's Lucifer. Saturn's the guy who gets the check. So each of the planets have their role in this. They have a lot of good to offer too. Saturn rules judgment and discipline, and Saturn rules structure and hierarchy and things like that. And if we're only focusing on the bad, how about this? If you're looking to make a rotten bargain, yeah, he's okay with a rotten bargain because that's of the flesh. He governs the flesh. It's like a casino. The world's like a casino out here, It's Saturn governs the flesh, the world, the material world, the vices of this world. And if you're looking to revel in this world and to block out the world coming or the world after, the greater world, the world unseen, the kingdom of heaven, whatever you want to call it, Saturn's the guy you want to bargain with. So I don't know if corrupt's the right word, because God knows exactly what he's doing. But in terms of fractions, Saturn's not God's adversary. Far from it. God's everything. God created everything. He hired 7 people. Saturn's the one who has to fire people, and he has the toughest job, so we make a villain out of him.
The disciplinarian.
But at the same time, he will play that job if you're looking to be rewarded in this world. Like all these SoundCloud rappers. Let me drill this point home. In Devil's Advocate, have you seen this movie, The Devil's Advocate? Great movie. Starts off in Florida, by the way. Great watch. Everyone's got to see it. Ends up in New York. The movie starts in Florida, ends in New York. Keanu Reeves plays a lawyer who's super innocent, super innocent. He's a great lawyer. He's in Florida with a Southern family. He's Bible. He knows the Bible like the back of his hand. He gets tempted, hired by a big firm out in New York. And in this movie, Al Pacino's the devil. He's the boss. He's the CEO of the big firm in New York City, the Big Apple. The Big Apple, right? Lucifer's serpent apple. So this is not my cosmology. I'm not basing it off any of this. But in that movie, we have one of the best expositions of evil and the networking of evil and kind of the place of evil. In that movie, he starts off in Florida, ends in New York. His boss is the devil. He's hired to protect various people, to represent in court various allies to the devil. So like the devil has his favored people here on earth who are doing his work. They get into trouble, and Al Pacino hires Keanu Reeves to be their lawyer. Well, in that movie, one of his cases that he has to do, one of them's supposed to be Donald Trump, one of them's supposed to be a voodoo priest, you know. So you see his clientele ranges from the highest of society to the lowest of society. And in that movie, a scene that struck me is Keanu Reeves is hired to represent a voodoo priest who's sacrificing animals underneath the streets of Brooklyn or Manhattan or something. Now he gets him free, not guilty in court. Religious freedom. They actually use the rabbi. Oh, rabbis do the same thing. It's okay, you know. That's how they got him off. But regardless of how they got him off, that movie shows what binds evil together. It's the blood. You can be on the bottom of society. If you make this bargain with Saturn, he'll skyrocket you to the top. And why would the people at the top vouch for people at the bottom? You'll often hear this. Rothschilds, whatever, sometimes they have friends with these dirt poor voodoo priests because they're on the same page. They're answering the same master in different paths. So in that movie, the number one law firm in New York is representing the poorest of the poor of voodoo priests. And what binds them together? What's the common element? It's the love of sacrifice. He's doing such a vital role for Saturn, sacrificing those animals, even if he's dirt poor. They got to protect him. That's that's Satan's number one, producer. But how is it? Why is it? We don't really know, but I would say that if your goals are bad, Saturn can help you find some dirty business, some dirty deals. And when we see SoundCloud rappers and people selling their soul, rocketing up to the height of society, you know what that comes along with, right? It's usually one of their Santeria moms or voodoo or hoodoo moms who gets them into this stuff. They sacrifice chickens. Next thing you know, they're making Illuminati sacrifices, whatever you want to call it. That's how you rocket from the top to the bottom. So don't be fooled that just because people are getting what they want in this life, that Saturn's disobeying orders. He's obeying orders 100%. I imagine God tells Saturn, "Oh, if they want to make rotten deals, give them the rotten deal and see, let them see how it turns out. Their soul's going to pay for it." And that's my understanding. It looks like Saturn's corrupt, but he's doing his job. And you can play right by Saturn. The owner of the bookstore here said his master said to him, when all's said and done, like at the end of Lord of the Rings, when all the darkness and the ring's destroyed, when you really get to see all the characters with their guard down, he said Saturn's the most beautiful. Saturn takes off the Grim Reaper mask, and it's like a beautiful woman in all white who was just playing the bad guy, playing the landlord, playing the stepfather. Totally.
Well, I would love to get into the metaphysics before we close of blood sacrifice and all these things we're talking about, because interestingly, you made another light bulb go off for me when you were talking about the word Lord, not always meaning Yahweh or God or Elohim, but it can also mean like negative lords. And when I started studying biblical Hebrew, one of my first vocab words was the word Baal or Baal in Hebrew. And I've come to find out that word just literally means Lord or owner. Yeah. And so we know in the biblical narrative that Elijah, battles the prophets of Baal, right? And they call fire down from heaven and all that. And so Baal is often this kind of adversarial God that Yahweh is battling in the Old Testament. And what's the definition of that word? It just means Lord or owner. And so we talk about the devil or Satan being the Lord or owner of this realm. And so the way I see the metaphysics of all this is that if Lucifer, Satan, negative polarity, if they're the Lord of this world, material, pleasure, wealth, fame, anything you want from this material lifetime, Satan can give you. So this is where the premise or the kind of like old saying of selling your soul to the devil, where that
Yeah.
premise really comes from. It doesn't mean you do some kind of witchcraft mirror trick where the devil appears in the mirror and then you make this conversational treatise with the devil, right? It's
Yeah.
much subtler than that. It means when I want something from the material world, and I could be anyone, like you said, the poorest of the poor, the richest of the rich. And often these young aspiring musicians and stuff and actors are the greatest target for the negative polarity, right? Because what do they want?
Yeah.
Fame, notoriety, success. And so in your heart, you're wanting, chasing, seeking, craving fame, and you're putting all this energy into getting famous. Well, you're going to attract Hasatan, the Lord, the owner of this realm, who says, "Oh, I see somebody wants some of my gifts.
Yeah.
Well, I'd be happy to bestow you with my gifts. If you give
Totally.
me what I want, I'll give
Yeah.
you what you want." It's that kind of pact where you have to begin doing something evil or antithetical to natural law, because that's how Hasatan gains power, through killing, number one, because God is the God of life. Therefore, Hasatan must be the God of death. There can absolutely be no crossover. This is the laws of logic. This is straight, simple metaphysics 101. A thing cannot be its opposite. So God cannot be the God of life and the negation of life at the same time. That makes no sense. And so you have to have a dichotomy here of God is only for the health, the life, the flourishing, and the love of all beings. So we can't accuse God of wanting, asking, or needing death for any reason. But who does need death? Hasatan, Lord of this realm. So when you want something from this realm, you are interfacing with Hasatan, whether you know it or not. And so you're going to run into some Freemason group or Illuminati, whatever. You're going to run into people who can help you get famous, whether they're in Hollywood or the media, and they're going to make you do a whole lot of evil shit to get you what you want. And when you do those things, you have sold your soul to the devil, right? Now you are entangled with the negative polarity and they've got their hooks in you. And it's really sad to see this, honestly, with so many celebrities. We could talk about Kanye West. We could talk about even Justin Bieber, who I think figured out what was going on. These kind of like well-meaning superstars who fall into these demonic cults and they go, whoa, I don't want any of this. And then what do we see happening? They get destroyed in the media and they get lied about and slandered because they had the negative polarity had their hooks in. So it's like once they got you, you can't get out without just ripping those hooks out, and you're going to suffer a lot. And so most people, like I don't think most people in Hollywood, whether it's Rihanna and Beyonce and all these people that we know make these Illuminati signs all the time and they're totally bought by this group. I often wonder, Connor, I'm like, I don't think that they necessarily might be like pure evil. They love it. They worship Lucifer. They might just be trapped, dude. You know, they might be like, God, these Luciferian nut jobs grabbed me when I was 21 coming up in the industry. They've got blackmail on me. They've got all my dirty secrets. I literally can't do anything but obey them. But deep down, they don't really want to. I think that's a good thing for us to realize that although it seems like the Luciferians have all this power, it's like they might just have everybody trapped. But really, once people figure out who they are, nobody really wants anything to do with them, but they don't have a choice anymore. And that's a lot less of a dark reality for us to face. So what are your thoughts on some of that stuff?
100%. You said it really, really well. I mean, that's all the key points that I think I was trying to make. But also, it's the odds are not stacked against us. If you walk the right path, everything's right where it's supposed to be. But like you said, you know, if you're looking for something, you know, and another part is, how do these people get sucked into the Illuminati? Your first sacrifice isn't going to be your mom or your grandma. It's going to be a dove or a pigeon or a chicken and some little voodoo thing. You start off with the neighborhood voodoo. That's the pipeline straight to the top of society. Those instincts is what, you know, what marks the progress from SoundCloud rapper to Beyonce. What are you willing to give up? You know, okay, you played with the little chickens in the neighborhood park with your mom, like you heard your mom talk about one time. You tested to see if the evil was real. Well, you won't necessarily know if the evil's real until after the success comes. Because what was the price? You know what I mean? And so it's hilarious that we're like talking to people who would be willing to sacrifice for fame, but that's not always what it's sold as. You're not sold as, hey, you're going to be a #1 artist, but you need to sacrifice your mom, or give us permission to sacrifice or whatever. It might just be a chicken to start off with. And if you're a flesh eater, if you eat chicken 3 times a day, who's going to bat an eye at, killing a chicken for a little bit of fame? That's the slippery slip. That's the danger of the flesh diet, is it really just blinds you to why animal sacrifice is so bad. And the Christians talked about this. What's worse? To eat it without sacrificing it, or to sacrifice it and not eat it? You know what I mean? Cultures have disagreed on this a lot, and Paul clearly seems to say, yeah, eat as much flesh as you want. Oh, but if it's sacrificed to a demon or to a false god, don't do that. What
And
else?
how do we know that the billions of animals being slaughtered in slaughterhouses, usually by inmates who are murderers and
Yeah.
rapists and things, and I even feel bad for them that they have to be in this environment, but how do we know that all of these animals are not being, sacrificed to idols and false gods? So it's really interesting, and I'm sure all three of us can attest to how much it's changed our state of consciousness by engaging in the fleshless diet. And I can really see why it was so important to James the Just and the early Christians, this purification of the vessel. It really helps you
Mhm.
connect with
Yeah.
God in such a deeper way and understand the moral philosophy of compassion to all beings, because really, I believe our duty on this plane is to really understand God's law and then
Yeah.
to live it.
That's a great point. And purifying the vessel makes me think of another big part of this that kind of bridges the gap between reptilians, adrenochrome, the blood, all of it. Parasites. Parasites, parasites, parasites.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think we'd be eating much flesh if we weren't infected with parasites, because that's their preferred diet, not the human
Yeah,
species' preferred diet. They need
great
an
point.
ecosystem of decay and filth. You're a walking, talking corpse if you're on a flesh diet. You're decaying within, you don't even know it. Riddled with
Yeah,
parasites. You're having sex with who they want. You're eating what they want. You're going where they want. I mean, we're living in a sci-fi zombie movie where most people are infected
yeah, in many ways.
with the flesh craving parasite. Like these mushroom funguses, whatever, they can control your brain. They can make you change your chemical composition of your brain. I noticed in the word Pharisee a great link to the word parasite.
Wow.
Because when you say parasitic, if something is parasitic, that's how you say it's of the Pharisees.
Or
Parasitic.
parasitic, yeah.
Wow.
Parasitic. And also, like, what is the word you and Cam talk about a lot? Parats?
Parits, yeah.
Parits. I mean, come on. They're ripping you open from the inside. And
Yeah.
the parasites is everything. Those are the reptilians. Those are the shapeshifters. Those are the demons and the snakes and the dragons that people were conquering in medieval times. It can be a sex demon. It can be a gluttony demon. It can be, but those demons find solace, and like they are harbored by parasites. So if you expel the parasites, it will be much easier to be virtuous, to not crave flesh, to not crave blood. So parasite to impair the sight, to impair your sight. You
Wow.
can't see. And why Jesus saw these blind people, apparently, according to what the Essene Gospel of Truth, Jesus and the group, they're administering enemas and colonics to
Hmm.
flush parasites, mass dumping of parasites. That's one of the few things that can return sight. If you are riddled with parasites in a diabetic, state where all your organs are stuffed up, you're riddled with parasites, your lymph isn't moving, you go blind. You get cataracts, you go blind. It happens all the time. If you get a colonic in a state like that, enemas, colonics, your chances of your sight being restored are incredible. It's it's one of the few things that
Well,
On
that
that
can
note,
on
cure.
that note, this is so crazy. I just got these new glasses, and to get the glasses, I had to get an eye exam for the first time in
Right.
years since I've gone vegetarian. And my sight improved dramatically, like a
Oh yeah.
33% improvement in my sight. So perhaps that's, you
33
know, par- uh,
33% better. That's right.
I got
James is
me.
Illuminati, bro. He's
Got
throwing the
me.
signals.
But yeah, perhaps that has to do with the cleansing of parasites. And the other thing I was going to add is it's very interesting that these parasites cause proclivity for sin, but engaging in sin also opens the door to the
Yeah,
parasites.
totally.
Gluttony, sloth,
Yeah.
lust. You're opening the door to
Fornication,
actually
yep.
getting them inside your body.
Oh yeah, it's chicken and the egg all over again. I mean, there's chicken parasites and there's egg parasites. Like the bad behavior makes you get more in you. If you engage in what they want you to do, they're getting their buddies to come over. You know what I mean?
Connor, have you read the Clementine recognitions or homilies?
I haven't. No,
Oh,
Okay.
bro.
sorry.
You
So
definitely got to read them, bro.
you'll love it. You'll love
Okay.
Incredible.
it.
Yeah.
I haven't read all of them, but I've just read, different chapters and passages. But they talk a lot about demonology, and scholars are unanimous that this is clearly some kind of Nazarene Ebionite text. I think it's from the early 2nd century or maybe before that. But they talk about demonology and they get into how and why demons prey on people, and it's very excellent, the metaphysics of it. One of the things they say is they will turn up and accentuate the carnal cravings of people to get them to engage in sin. And then once they engage in sin, it creates a kind of opening in them spiritually. And then the demon can attach to whatever the sinful energy is that they've put into themselves. And whether that's porn or eating flesh or whatever, right?
Mhm.
And then they whisper thoughts into the mind that sound and pretend to be your own thoughts. And so you don't even question them. And it's like, hey, go do this bad thing, do that bad thing. And so it's like this slow, gradual hijacking of your mind. It's a very parasitic type of thing, is what I'm saying.
Yes.
And so when they describe this, it makes perfect sense that this would be the strategy. And so it really isn't a one thing or the other. It's like it's a very ingenious way of captivity. They've devised the demons have this perfect plan. And so if you want to stay out of the jurisdiction of the demonic, you have to do what? Conquer your cravings, as Jesus said. You have to
Yeah.
be live justice and righteousness and be of service to others and not live for yourself. Jesus said, you got to deny yourself to follow me. Because if you're still living for yourself, that means you have cravings for sense pleasures that the demons can use and veer you off course.
Yeah.
So I'm curious if your studies have shown you that kind of element with all the parasites and demonology.
Oh yeah. 100%. We didn't really talk about like my path to vegetarianism at all. That's totally cool, but I went vegetarian largely for selfish reasons. Now at this point, I love the animals. That's as much of a reason as any. But getting into it, I want to be healthy. It was purely health for me. Purely like all my, people that I knew who grew, they grew up, and I saw them go from like 30 to 50 when I was growing up. I mean, everyone gets fat. Like very, very few people get thin, and
Yeah.
gluttony is just so normalized in America. And like you said, oh, what are your things? Porn, flesh, gluttony. Sounds like the average Tuesday night for most of America is like a rotisserie chicken and some P
Yeah,
Hub
it's
and
true.
surfing Tinder and But I'd say that for me it was looking at people get fat, get old, get just broken down where their mind would still be sharp. Their mind has so many more years
Yeah.
in them, but the body's broken down. I mean,
Just
God
aging
didn't,
so quickly.
yeah. And, my dad passed away when I was pretty young, when I was about 19. My dad drank a lot of alcohol. So I've never been a drinker. I've never been drunk once in my life. My dad was super, super fit when he was raising me. By the time I
Wow.
was 18 or 19, 300 pounds, addicted to alcohol, you know, just defeated. So capable, so smart, had a great job, lost it all, you name it, because of vice. You know,
Yeah.
there were things outside that he had obstacles, but the sober man conquers the obstacles far better than the drunk or the addicted or the craving, the sinful man does. 100%, and that's why I always think my Christianity is all about virtue. And this Christ consciousness stuff. Yeah, okay,
Hmm.
sounds good, sounds nice. Throw it in the garbage. Throw it in the garbage. Christ conscience is what we all need.
Right.
I don't need to know what's in the room next door. That's consciousness. Oh, I know it's hidden in your pocket. I know what the secrets of okay. Cool. It's the conscience we need.
Can you forgive
Conscious.
people? Yeah.
We just did an
Exactly.
episode all about this, what Christ consciousness really means, and it's really about the virtues of Christ, working to embody that
Yeah.
humility and service and discipline. That's
Yes.
Christ.
Nothing
It's
else
not this
matters.
self exaltation. I'm God. Look at
Yes.
me. No, it's a humility and service.
100%. And I'd say that seeing people around me get destroyed by seemingly not a big scary villain, not a destruction, didn't get ripped out of my life. He just got fat and got less healthy, and suddenly your hopes and your dreams can't overcome that, and you
Yeah.
fall victim to your vices. And so to me, vegetarianism was a way out of that. I was guaranteed, it's not everything's perfect. You're still going to have to stay fit and so on. The vegetarians stay thin. They just do. They stay thinner, they stay healthier, they stay more limber. Holistic vegetarians, of course, not our Starbucks vegans, the blue-haired piercing insect. Oh, I can't wait till that lab grown meat comes out so that I can finally, go back to eating flesh, right? 'Cause that
They all got the vax and all that,
that
and
that karma
completely.
free lab meat. Oh, I can't wait till that comes out. Then when we can all stop being vegan. Those are emotional vegans. It's purely emotional. Oh, I feel
Right.
bad for the cow. It's got to be holistic. It's got to be your health. You got to come first. The animals got to come first too. And vegetarianism is the only way you can holistically serve the universe, the world, nature, all of that. And yeah, parasites are one of the biggest obstacles, and I'm big on that. I'm big on detoxing.
Well, I think we're coming up on time, but I wanted to tease your work to our audience about the Garden of Eden and the role America plays in all of this. Well, we'll have to have you back for a second episode where we could really go deep on this juicy stuff, like the giants and trees and all the amazing things you discuss on your
Mhm.
channel. But could you give us a brief intro into your theories about the Garden of Eden and the role of the Americas in this biblical story?
Totally. And like you said, I'm totally happy with how this went. It's okay we didn't get to any of that stuff. It probably works out better because by the next time we're going to talk about it, I'm going to have a book out that we can kind of point to and so
Perfect.
on.
Nice.
That's totally about that, the Garden of Eden in Florida and all that. But just a summary is I've lived in Florida my whole life. I run the Old World Florida channel, and our focus is the hidden history of Florida. So that's ancient history, that's archaeology, right up, everything between ancient American history, Native Americans, all the way up to Scientology. Why are they in Florida? Jekyll Island, why'd that happen there? Um, the Coral Castle, right? Everything in between, everything from hauntings to blood sacrifice, astrology, holistic health, hidden history of Florida. So, and I'd say that, I've lived here my whole life. A lot of people were doing videos about like Tartaria and New York and Boston, and nobody was doing Florida. So I just stepped up to the plate and started putting out Florida content, and it became a wonderful outlet for me to just kind of push my other interests onto people too, like holistic health. And like I'll work up like a year of getting like I don't know, like 10,000 subscribers more in a year, right? And then I'll be like, all right, now time to remind them what I'm really about. It's not just all the all the buildings and the hidden history. No, if you like me, if you like what I have to say, you're going to have to like how I got there too and what my process is. And I like to think I sucker people in with like the ancient history and the curiosity of the Bimini Road and hidden ruins and stuff. But my community is really supportive of holistic health. And we do meetups in Florida too on like the full moons and stuff like that. But yeah, that's my whole thing. It's ancient Florida, conspiracy theories in Florida, and lots more to talk about, but that's it really.
Yeah, it's an amazing channel. Everyone go check it out. You're gonna have your mind blown. I've learned so much. It's honestly one of my favorite channels. Very, very juicy stuff. Aaron,
Thank you.
anything else you want to touch on?
Yeah, I mean, we could just go forever, man. There's so many great topics, and even the ones we've touched on, I really feel like they could each be a whole podcast. So we'll definitely get you back in here. And I would personally love to hear the theory that, and correct me if I'm wrong, Connor, but the theory in the book you're writing is that the original Garden of Eden, written about in Genesis, was actually in Florida, not in the
Yeah.
Middle East where we think it is due to the flood and all kinds of stuff. And I'd heard
Yeah.
that once before, and I'm like, I just can't imagine how you could justify that. And then talking to you, you just pulled out a couple of things where I was like, oh shit, like that actually could make a lot of sense. So let's definitely
Totally.
get you back in here for that, because I think my audience would enjoy that.
That's actually a really good point too. And there's so many rabbit holes with that. But the Garden of Eden in Florida thing, um man, there's so much to say, but so little
It's like, how do we
time.
even start this Pandora's box?
Yeah,
Yeah.
I don't even want
At
to
the end of a
tackle
podcast.
it. But that's the whole thing is, Garden of Eden in Florida theory. It's really not that new. That's probably the big takeaway is it's not
Yeah.
that new. It's not that revolutionary. It's not saying the Bible's wrong. It fits in wonderfully. And the best thing, this is actually what got me back into the Jesus way, the Nazarene, tradition, the Essenian traditions. I was studying and researching the Garden of Eden like all day for like the last, year and a half, 6 months. It's been nonstop. I've only been focused about this book, but I'm studying the Garden of Eden every day. I've got the Hebrew interlinear Bible. I've got the King James version, going through that and just holding a magnifying glass to it. And then the second part would be Noah's Ark. Those are the 2 points I'm really honing in on is Garden of Eden, Noah's Ark, and just magnifying those and almost kind of not ignoring, but not really looking at the other Bible as I'm focusing on that. It's impossible not to see the pure vein of the way, the right way, the Christianity, the vegetarianism. So studying the Garden of Eden super intensely in Scripture totally reinforced my path down vegetarianism. And if there were any discrepancies, I mean, they would have came up, and it would have been difficult for me to deal with these last 2 years. But it's perfect, and Florida is one of the few places that you can really really thrive vegetarian. I think you can do it everywhere,
Mhm.
but people like to say that, oh, it's too cold where I live. Oh, it's no excuses in Florida. So it's the true Fertile Crescent, the Gulf of Mexico. And like I said, there's too much to tackle in a couple sentences, but
Do you have any videos on that topic on your channel?
the Garden of Eden,
Yeah.
yeah, I've got one. There's a bunch that are about that. The one that's most concise, it's a little long. It's a long video. It's an audio book. It is the book that I'm republishing. I'm just adding 150 pages. It's called an addendum. Add
Uh-huh.
end add end. It's like a big introduction. I'm just adding on and supporting the stuff he put out. It's a very small book. Originally, it's only like 150 pages. But I have a whole audiobook of that. So just his writing. It's called In the Beginning by E. Calloway. It's got a red cover on the thumbnail. And that book is crazy. He gets into everything from evolution to multiple species of Earth, or multiple species of human on Earth. And all this crazy stuff, ties it all into Florida. And yes, says Florida's the Garden of Eden. Noah's Ark departed to Eurasia with gopher wood that only grows in Florida. But that's the gist, basically.
Yeah.
So that one video is pretty good.
Nice. Well, we'll link that video down below in the show notes, as well as your YouTube channel and all that good stuff.
Cool.
And is there anything else you want to plug, man, before we let you go?
No, just that I'm really happy to meet you guys and to hopefully contribute a little bit to what you guys are doing. And if you ever need anything from me, editing or anything like that, just hit me up. And I was hoping I would get to meet Cam today, but people, go check out Christspiracy. I watched it for the first time on the way to Austin when I saw James.
Oh, nice.
So I love that movie, but dude, I didn't know anything in that movie. I mean, I knew it, but I didn't get it from that movie. So when I see this movie, it's totally well produced. I'm like, man, everyone's going to think like I've been just repeating Christspiracy for like 2 years,
See, there's the theme again. Multiple people coming to the same conclusions.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I'm just honored to be here. I'm a big fan of the Jesus Way podcast. Everyone needs to go like and subscribe. If you're here from my end, go hit them up. And no, I'm just grateful to be here. You guys have been great. Thanks.
Thanks, brother. Yeah, the Nazarene community continues to grow, and we see it really making a dent on spiritually, philosophically in the world. That's the goal, at least. So thank you so much, Conor. This was one of my favorite podcasts ever. You absolutely crushed it. It was fascinating. And thank you, Eric.
And we'll run it back soon, man.
For sure.
So go check out Conor in Old World, Florida in the YouTube description below for all of his content and more. James, thank you as well as always for joining us today and leading this conversation. And thank you to our viewers for tuning in. And hopefully you found today's episode interesting and inspiring in many ways. And as you guys know, the most important thing here is the Jesus way itself, to love God, love people. So get out there and follow the Jesus way and bring that kingdom of heaven to earth. And we'll see you all back here again on the next episode. Peace and love.